Hey guys, in today's video I want to talk about one of the most messed up manga I have ever read. Actually, one of the most messed up stories I've ever read. This manga is called Chi no Wadachi, but it's also known as A Trail of Blood or Blood on the Tracks. I would explain it as the metamorphosis of Seiichi Osabe because this story absolutely destroys this kid. So if you haven't already read this, I would say go read it because I'm going to be spoiling everything up until the current issue. At the time of this recording, there are 114 chapters available. Okay, Seiichi Osabe was born in the 1980s. The story takes place when he is in middle school in the 90s. His cousin Shigeru is always coming over to play games with him, and Shigeru always talks about how his parents are, or his mother in particular, is overprotective and kind of just makes fun of him for that reason. Everything seems pretty normal. He has his cousin, he goes to public school, he has friends. His mother seems very caring and kind for him. Fast forward a while. Oh, I didn't mention the cat. Okay, so there's a lot of foreshadowing in this story. In the very first chapter, Seiichi is like a young child, maybe 3 years old, and he sees a dead cat on the ground, and he goes up to pet it, and he finds out it's dead, and then he kind of wakes up. He tells his mother Seiko about the cat, and then she was like, oh, you remember that, because it wasn't really, I mean, it was a dream, but it was a memory that he repressed for reasons that won't be explained for another 100 chapters. Okay, back to present. They're going on a hike. The grandparents, Shigeru's parents, Seiko, Seiichi, everybody. There's this cliff that they walk up to in which Shigeru thinks it'll be funny to push Seiichi, and his mom runs up and catches him, and then everyone laughs at her for being overprotective. They go about their business, and then Shigeru and Seiichi go off on their own and end up back at that cliff where he is just playing on the edge and Seiichi is keeping his distance. And then this is where the roller coaster begins. Seiko runs up and tells him to get away from the cliff. He makes fun of her because he's not really in danger. And then he starts to like wobble and almost fall off, and she runs up and catches him. And then there's this moment where he looks up at her and she's smiling at him, and then she pushes him off the cliff. And Seiichi is obviously traumatized by this, and this is the driving force for like the rest of the story. Everyone goes to find Shigeru's body, in which he is alive, and Seiko tells Seiichi, I can't believe he fell. Like, did you see that? He fell on his own. And Seiichi is just like in a daze. He can't say anything. And you know, fast forward, Shigeru's in the hospital in critical condition. He can't speak. He can hardly open his eyes. The doctors think he may never recover, and the police asks Seiko, because she is the witness, like what she saw, and she said, you know, he fell on his own. They ask Seiichi, and he says, yeah, that's what happened. It's really interesting how Seiichi won't tell the truth, at least what he thinks is the truth, because the story gets into a lot of psychological gray area. Clearly, he is just trying to protect his mother here, but it gets a lot deeper than that. Okay, so this girl, Yuiko Fukishi, comes to Seiichi's house, and she leaves him a letter. His mom comes home and finds them together, and Yuiko lets herself out, and then Seiko finds the letter, reads it. It was Yuiko confessing to Seiichi about how she feels about him, and then asks for some kind of response. And then together, Seiko and Seiichi rip up the letter, not because he wanted to, but because she wanted to, and he slowly descends into only obeying his mother against his own wishes. There are moments where he distances, and then moments where he's totally absorbed into her. Seiichi begins to have this intense stutter because he's extremely nervous. He knows what he saw, and he doesn't feel like he can tell anybody, and he just lives with that all the time. He starts to lash out in anger or in confusion. His friends at school are just making fun of him, and he ends up kicking a hole in the teacher's podium, in which he is in trouble, and his mother steps in and asks, like, why did you do that? You know, my perfect boy, he doesn't He doesn't do stuff like that. Seiichi ends up going out with Yuiko, and the mother catches on that he's not coming home from school on time. This is where he is at the most distancing himself from her. He's trying to choose his own happiness over what she wants for him. From that point on, manipulated psychologically into not making any decisions for himself. So he ends up hanging out with her more regularly, and then his mother kind of roaming around town looking for him, and she runs into them, in which she says some really mean things about Yuiko, but they end up running away together and staying in Yuiko's house, where she has an abusive father as well. Not that Seiichi's father's abusive, he's actually great. Seiichi experiences puberty. It's really weird. Like, there's a lot of adolescent imagery in this because Seiichi is so young, and you know, psychosexual development is. But anyway, Seiko comes to her house looking for him, and she is just guilt tripping everybody, just screaming out that her perfect child ran away, it's all her fault and all this stuff. And yes, it is her fault, but she's only saying that so he'll feel bad for her and come back. So Yuiko's father catches them, and they run away, and they were gonna just, you know, run away together. And for whatever reason, Seiichi freaks out on her and runs back home to his mother. And this is the first time he questions her about why she did it. And she strangles him and tells him, like, that's really rude to ask. Wow, I might have to do this in 2 parts. I didn't realize how much I read in 2 days. I'm not even halfway through this. I might have to do this in 2 parts, which would make this actually easier because I don't want to skip too many important things. Seiko makes Seiichi promise that he will not go near her or talk to her ever again. He goes back to school the next day, or whenever he goes back. I think that was like a Saturday. He goes back to school and sees Yuiko with a bandage over her eye, assuming her father beat her when she came back home. And she leaves a note in his desk saying that it's her fault he ran away. She feels like she's to blame. She overwhelmed him, which makes me mad because I don't think anybody is at fault. It's just unfortunate. And these two characters bond over how terrible their parents are to them. But Seiichi does not tell her what his mom did to Shigeru. So they meet up after class, and he tells her, my mom said I can't talk to you anymore. And he walks away, and she's like, well, I don't care what your mom says. How do you feel? And Seiichi turns around and says, I hate you. And this is the beginning of him completely losing himself and turning into his mother, which I will explain the remaining half of what's out so far in a part 2. But this story just gets so intense. I didn't plan on reading all 114 chapters in 2 days, but I was absolutely absorbed into this story. The artwork really like brings out like what's real and what's not real, and when the characters are like having brain fog, and the imagery is just so great. But yeah, come back for part 2. I'll explain the rest of the story so far. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like and please subscribe. We are currently at 45 subscribers, and it is February of 2022. Anyways, if you like manga, if you like anime, if you like movies, if you like games, jump in my Discord. I'd like to thank our 2 patrons really quick, Carrie Smith from Park Keen Community and Jason K. And I would also like to bring up my first ever fan art. Here it is. But anyways, thanks for watching.